What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you with another 2025-2026 NBA season look ahead. We are on to the Denver Nuggets, which means I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by Adam Mares. He is a host of the All City NBA podcast with Tim Legler, and he is also over at DNVR Nuggets, VP of Content and Strategy and Growth at All City as well. And you should check out all the DNVR sports content. Your guys' Nuggets post-game shows are like when I'm trying to check in on the Nuggets, they're a lifeblood for me. So you do great work over there. How you doing, Adam?
I'm good. I appreciate that intro. We do have a lot of fun over there, and the Nuggets give us a lot to talk about, which is always nice, especially this year.
Yeah, and look, so I listened to a few of the most recent podcasts in prep of this show, and I even watched the preseason game against the Clippers, the first half of it anyway, when I found out we were doing this. But I want to start with just last season really quickly. It was kind of like the perfect ending for the team that the Nuggets were, because they fired Calvin Booth and Michael Malone way too late in the season, it felt like, and then they pushed the Thunder to 7 games they end up doing, so it kind of just didn't make a ton of sense. What were just some of your biggest overarching takeaways or lessons learned that are sticking with you as you were journeying through the offseason but also heading into this year?
Well, it's so funny. So over on the DNVR Nuggets podcast, I'm an ex-collegiate player. I like analytics. Yeah, I like to break down tape. I like to do all that stuff. This is my 12th year covering the NBA, and people think I'm joking or think I'm being ridiculous. Vibes are such a more important part of basketball than people think. And it's funny because we always talk about the vibes of the team over there, and I've had people in the various front offices and coaching staff and always tell me, hey, man, you guys are right. It's about the vibes. It's about the vibes. The vibes were horrible last year, and culture in an organization or in a locker room, it's hard to build. It's even more hard to sustain. And I think if you ask about lessons, the Nuggets made a move on Michael Malone and Calvin Booth, who I think were at the heart of the culture disintegrating, and they moved too late. And that move was able to turn a very mediocre team around with 3 regular season games to prep to make it all the way to Game 7 of the second round against the eventual champs. So that's the lesson, is that the Nuggets, when they have Nikola Jokic, are going to have a very high floor as long as you can have a culture that can compete and stay together.
What type of power do you have to get the Nuggets to create maybe like a vibes metric? I feel like we need to figure out a way to quantify vibes now. I wonder what that would entail.
There's got to be something that you can observe that's like, yeah, this is actually what it is. There's some way to observe it. You see it when you're covering a team. You can just tell how a team's doing. But there's probably one thing you could point out and say, does this team do this? They have bad vibes.
And look, to your credit, you talked about it a lot on the DNVR show. I think you talked about it last year when we were doing the Denver Nuggets look ahead, just about the Michael Malone, Calvin Booth dynamic. So you were in front of that. And then, with 4 games left in the season or 3 games left in the season, they finally acted on it, whatever it ended up being.
Yes.
The Cam Johnson trade, you've been adamant too from listening that it was not just a cost-cutting move. I 100% agree with that. When you're looking at his fit on this team specifically, offensively, what is going to be the biggest difference for Denver going from Michael Porter Jr. to him?
I think without question the biggest difference is that you now have in your starting lineup 5 guys who know how to solve a variety of problems on the fly. It's not just about drawing up plays or drawing up a scheme or drawing something together. It's when you get into a playoff series, teams are going to test you in a variety of ways. And Jokic is the world's greatest problem solver, but he's a collaborative problem solver. You need everybody else on the court to be on his level, thinking through when to cut, when to space, what's happening, so you can read everything. Michael Porter Jr. was just not very good at that. He was very skilled and he could do things, but he limited Denver's collective ability to problem solve on the fly. And I think Cam Johnson is a very good one, an above average problem solver, a guy that just kind of understands what's going on, what's the team trying to do to us, and what's the pressure point. He's very good at that. So now you have Christian Braun, who I think is very good at this. He's really developed into this over the years. Aaron Gordon, who's become a very smart player. Jamal Murray, obviously Nikola Jokic, and now Cam Johnson. It gives you 5 people to work together to solve problems, which in my opinion is what the playoffs are all about.
When you look at the Cam Johnson minutes, do you expect him to be mostly tethered to Nikola Jokic, or could he be more of a part of some of those stagger units, especially because he ran – maybe not conventionally ran, but he ran a lot of offense for the Nets last year. And the Nets, the players on their team were probably worse than the players that are going to be in the Denver Nuggets second unit at this point. And so I'm just curious how you expect them to use him in that way.
That's a good question that I don't have the answer for. I would say the early returns are that he will be pretty tied to Jokic. I think Denver wants to. David Adelman has said he wants to run a 10, maybe 11-man rotation this year, which is a huge departure from Michael Malone, who I think would run an 8-man rotation in the regular season if he could. But a 10 or 11-man rotation maybe doesn't – you're probably only staggering one or two guys. In this last preseason game, it was Jamal Murray primarily with a little bit of Christian Braun playing with the second unit. But I also could see a world where I don't think Denver knows the answer to that yet. I think they want to try a couple different looks with their second unit and see what works, figure out what the personality is. So my hunch would be I think he mostly is tied to Jokic, but Denver's going to experiment and see how that goes.
One of the other things that's been talked a lot about, and then you guys over at DNVR were talking about it coming out of that Clippers game, is the defensive schematic changes that the Nuggets are going to employ. Do you have any sense of what that's going to look like, or what are the biggest changes that you're going to be tracking for this team on the defensive end?
Yeah, and I actually have a video out here, a little film breakdown of some of the stuff that they did in this last game. Should be up here shortly, probably by the time this is published. But there's a couple things. First and foremost, it's the three-quarter court pressure, the pickup points. Denver last year did not apply a lot of full court pressure, in part because they didn't have the bodies that can do it. They didn't have the depth. So first of all, you're looking at 6 guys who you sort of trusted, Russell Westbrook being the 6th. And you didn't want to wear your guys out with that because you didn't have anybody to spell them. This year, 10, 11-man rotation, they're going to use a lot of full court pressure and just try to get the ball out of the other team's primary ball handlers. And then they'll have certain configurations where they're trying to pick them up at half court. So it's not three-quarter court press, but they're still trying to make their pickup points higher. Then the second thing is they want to get more physical, and they've talked about this in their media availabilities, that they look around the league and they look how the playoffs were, how they were defended in the playoffs, and they say, hey, the league allows the defense to set the physicality of a game, and we're going to try to really test what that is. And you've seen that in that last game. Bruce Brown, Christian Braun, even Jokic just getting physical and trying to initiate contact to establish a higher baseline, trusting that they have the bodies that if a guy gets in foul trouble, it's not as damning as it would have been last year. But the third and last thing, it's a mixture of both zone, which I think they're going to try to play a lot of zone. The league is moving more and more towards zone. More teams are playing it. But the zone principle in particular of rather than having Jokic play high up in the pick and roll, and then you're vulnerable to that pocket pass, and then it's 4-on-3 behind that type of high show. Instead, what they're doing is they're bringing the defender, the guard defender, from one pass away, really far away from his defender to be the guy that kind of keeps the ball handler from turning the corner. That allows Jokic to play drop a little bit more, so the pocket pass isn't there either. But instead of turning the corner and going downhill towards Jokic and drop, it's the guard coming one pass away. It leaves yourself vulnerable to that quick pass, one pass away, and the guy knocks down a shot. But I think Denver would rather that than get themselves into rotation where they're giving up everything.
2 follow-up questions on that. Do you think they have now, I know they're deeper, but do you think they have the personnel, or maybe the better way to phrase it is the athleticism, to really increase their pickup points when you're looking at three-quarter court pickups?
Yeah. It's a great question, and I think the teams that have success with this, they have athleticism and length and speed and those types of things. I think Bruce Brown can be this. He's not going to be playing a ton of minutes, so I think you talk about being able to go all out a little bit more. I think Christian Braun has the strength to do this against certain types. I think Peyton Watson probably has the length to do this against certain types. Outside of those guys, no, I don't think there's anybody else that you're really counting on. It's not Tim Hardaway Jr. It's not going to be Jamal Murray. Cam Johnson's not going to be in that role. So I think you're really looking at those 3 guys. And by the way, Spencer Jones, which maybe we'll get to the Spencer Jones portion of the show.
You were extolling the virtues of Spencer Jones, so I have a question about Spencer Jones.
Okay.
So you were. But so the other question I would have is, so when you're talking about them even just varying their schemes, or when you're talking about if you have to be the person that's going to cheat off of the one pass away guy, how much of that was, okay, we don't think Michael Porter Jr. can be in a bunch of varied setups. Now we have Cam Johnson, who we might think is going to be better in those circumstances. Is that a factor at all, or is this more about maybe trying to make life easier on Jokic?
Well, they started to do this a little bit more actually in the playoffs under David Adelman. Okay. So I do think this was a little bit of already in the works. But I absolutely think part of why Michael Porter got traded this offseason was David Adelman looked at it and said, we're not athletic enough or just defensively talented enough with our the core of our roster to be able to just play like most teams do. We're going to have to be smart. We're going to have complex rotations. And yes, Michael Porter Jr., Offensively, he limited Denver because there was only so much he could do. So much he could read the court in real time. He was a slow thinker. He just wasn't that type of guy. But defensively is where I think it really showed up. He was a guy that made a lot of mistakes, and teams took advantage of that. Out of timeouts, I always said, people would be like, where are they going to attack? What are they going to try to do? It was always the same. Put Michael Porter Jr. as the low man, run something up top, and make him be the rotation guy that has to like rotate and read what's happening. And that was Denver's vulnerability. So, yes, I think the scheme is more complicated. It probably requires more behind Jokic, in terms of like quick early reads. It's a lot about meeting the defense higher up the court as opposed to waiting and reacting to what they do. And, yeah, I think that they look at it and say, hey, we have maybe the smartest starting five in the NBA, so we're going to lean into a scheme that requires more intelligence.
The Jonas Valanciunas trade, still insanity that the Kings put themselves in a position where they needed to make it. But how much do you actually think that he is going to give Nikola Jokic a breather? Like, how much of an emphasis is it going to be like, we have a backup five that can actually play real minutes now?
I think it's 100% the plan. Whether it works or doesn't work, they're going to go with it. I don't think this is a thing like Dario Saric last year where it's you get a couple games into the season and say, that didn't work, let's pivot. I think they're going to sink or swim with Jonas Valanciunas being their sort of the anchor of that second unit. And I think he can do it. I mean, part of it is Denver's building in the zone scheme. So even with Jokic, they're trying to play a little bit more zone. Well, that translates to Valanciunas as well. You're teaching everybody how to play the zone. So when you go to your second unit, your hope is you can spell them with that. You're playing this drop but one pass away help scheme that, again, allows your bigs to be a little less mobile, and it's really trying to cover for them. So I think I think that the plan is to just go with it until it works. And I think it will work. But the big thing is Jamal Murray staggers with the second unit, so that's just like your starters. Bruce Brown is kind of like Christian Brown, where he's not that great of a shooter, but he can do it. He can slash a little. He plays hard. He plays defense. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a floor spacer like Cam Johnson, the C version of him, but, somewhere there. Peyton Watson, defensive, rangy, a little bit of an AG. And then Valanciunas, obviously your five. They're trying to use him a little bit like Jokic, mostly on the block version of Jokic. And I think that that's like close enough. If you look at years past, Russell Westbrook, DeAndre Jordan, that's nothing like Jokic and Murray. So even if you say that Val's not really like Jokic, he's much more like him than DeAndre Jordan was. And I think that's kind of the idea of this Nuggets roster.
What is the closest they've come to not deviating too far from the Jokic principles in the second unit as the backup five? Is it Mason Plumlee?
For sure Mason Plumlee. I mean, they basically were able to run the same thing. Obviously, he's not as much of a threat from outside, but it was all the same actions, delay and elbow entry and those types of things. And I will say, actually, what I think this one reminds me of with Valanciunas is less like Mason Plumlee and more like DeMarcus Cousins. If you remember the brief stint DeMarcus Cousins was Denver's backup center, it went well where it was something like the Jokic offense as if Jokic shot 10 times more and passed, 10 times less.
I would be curious to see if they're going to use Jonas in at least some of the same situations around the block more. Is that someone who in the past, like he's been able to draw in the past, maybe not so much last season, a ton of fouls. And that adds to the time that Jokic gets to rest if he's just not on the floor. Like all of a sudden he's on the bench for 4 minutes, and that turns into how many extra if there's pauses for free throws or fouls. And I've always wondered if that's it's the same thing. We talked about this, my co-host and I, with Jimmy Butler during the non-Stephen Curry minutes in Golden State. A little bit different for Denver because like Jonas Valanciunas isn't going to be that high volume of a guy, but anything to just get Jokic to not have to play like 37, 38 minutes a night would be incredible.
This is why I love doing this show, is you think of angles on things that I haven't thought of yet. You're right. He does draw fouls. First of all, he's a very physical guy, so he's either going to foul you. I think he's going to foul a lot, but he's also going to, draw a lot of fouls. I don't know if it's going to mean anything towards like Jokic actually got of real time, not clock time, but just of real time. He got an extra 3-4 minutes because there were free throws and stuff like that. That could make a meaningful impact. But what I really think it makes an impact on is Jokic is really good at drawing non-shooting fouls. And he is actually one of the guys who is significantly more impactful as a player when the team is in the bonus. He's just not good at getting into the bonus. So if you help him, this is actually a thing that Russell Westbrook brought to the team last year, is he drew a lot of fouls. And so to start the second quarter, he would be on. And if you draw 3-4 fouls in the first 4 or 5 minutes of the quarter. Jokic checks in and draws all those other ones, and now they're free throws. So it actually could, it's crazy, but I could see that being a case where Val accelerates you getting into the bonus so that when Jokic checks in, all those off-ball fouls become free throws.
I made a note of it, and I stopped exactly what I was doing, so I was trying to work during the Nuggets-Clippers game, but they played Valanciunas and Jokic together for a hot minute. Were they just experimenting, or do you think that could become a tool in their belt, especially like you said before, if they're going to try and implement these zone defensive principles?
David Adelman said at Media Day in no uncertain terms, they will play together. I do want to play them together. Now, he has also said there's a lot of ideas we have, and we're going to try them. Not everything will work, and that's okay. And so that might fall into the, yes, we gave it a real try, and it didn't work out the way we hoped. But I think it is 100% a part of their plan this year to make that work. And I understand why. Denver is a team, you always go into these playoff series and you think about this team wants to do what they want to do. We want to do what we want to do. Who can force teams to kind of put down one of their weapons? Valanciunas is such a big-bodied guy that if it works, if they find a way to defend somewhat adequately with it, he's such a big body that he would alter your rotation. You wouldn't be able to just say we go small and, oh, yeah, to start the end of the first quarter, we go with our real small lineup. He's the type of guy that would say, no, you need a real power forward at minimum on the court because you need a center for Val and you need at least a John Collins-sized player to guard Jokic. You can't go with a Jalen Williams or an Amir Coffey type guy for Jokic. You're going to have to alter your rotation to match us. We'll see if it works. I'm somewhat optimistic. I'm more just intrigued. I like when teams find, like David Adams or Steven Adams in Şengün last year was cool because it wasn't something I would have thought would have worked, but it did. And I always like when teams find something that seems like it wouldn't work, and it's like, hey, this is a whole new type of way of playing, and now you have to blink or not.
It does feel like we've come a long way in a very short time from just like, it almost feels like if it was yesterday, we were wondering, can Evan Mobley and Jared Allen play together, to now how many double big from, like, now it's, oh, Jonas and Jokic will play together. We're just not going to bat an eye. Like, we want to see it, but it's just like, yeah, that makes sense.
What was interesting with Denver, I mean, 100%, right? Usually, first of all, 10 years ago, it was like Robert Covington can play the 5. I mean, who cares? He might have been a 3 in 2008, but now he's a center. And then, yes, recently it's even Mobley and Allen. They're both mobile and can do things. They're defensive-minded, so it kind of makes sense. Val and Jokic are not – neither one of them is defensive-minded. They're both opposite, very slow. And it's like, hey, well, who knows? Maybe there's a way to cover for that because they're so good offensively. What I think is interesting is if you think about double bigs typically, you want spacing around them. Denver yesterday put out Christian Braun, Julian Strawther, and Peyton Watson around him. Not exactly an elite three-point shooting group, but they're all enormous. And I think if you're going to play zone, one of the things you need is as much wingspan as you can get. And Denver put, Christian Braun's the smallest guy that was out there. I think he's 6'6". So it was just a big lineup to try to cover him defensively, hoping that those two guys would just grab like 6 offensive rebounds.
Is that the direction you would go when fleshing out a double big lineup for them? Or is there what would be your ideal 3 from this team around?
I think it's, at this moment, a low leverage lineup, so it's not one you're going to alter everything else. You'd probably fit in whatever's remaining pieces around it as long as there's length. But Cam Johnson seems like he could give one of those guys a spell because he also has length and can play the 3 or one of those spots. So I think I would experiment a little bit with that. You probably will need a little bit more shooting on the court overall, so maybe Cam Johnson in for like a Peyton Watson or a Christian Braun.
So I was going back and watching basically all of Peyton Watson's preseason possessions, which I really try not to do before I do shows like this because I don't want to be like infected with like the good preseason just vibes. But Adam, the ball's in his hands a lot.
Go.
I like it. Is this going to be a thing, or it's my same question, or is it just like preseason experimentation that maybe won't get busted out in the regular season that much?
I think that the style of play. So just to take people back who don't follow Peyton Watson. Defensive player, very athletic, very long, built like Jaden McDaniels, and I think the hope is that he can become a Jaden McDaniels type defender. But offensively, what is he? Under Michael Malone, he basically was a corner 3-point shooter who can't shoot, so he didn't really have that skill. I have always thought he handled the ball well, and he passes surprisingly well. He makes these very good reads when he has the ball in his hands. So I said, give him the ball. I know it sounds counterintuitive. This guy who's not an offensive player will give him the ball. But I actually think that's the way you use him. And David Adelman seems to agree because so far through 3 preseason games, he's bringing the ball up, he's running pick and rolls, he's initiating the offense. And I actually think he might be more like a Men Thompson than Jaden McDaniels. I mean, the B or C version of him. He's not a superstar type. He's not as strong and obviously as skilled, but he might have more of that skill set. And what I'll say is I think David Adelman is going to stick with this for a long time, putting the ball in his hands. I'm not sure how he'll do. I am betting on him because I think he's a good player. But if you told me it didn't work out, I wouldn't be wholly surprised.
Does maybe like the lack of a conventional backup playmaker bode well for them? Like, well, yeah, we're going to see really if this thing works.
Well, the thing I think is going to evolve over time, and we already saw this in the preseason, is if I'm guarding Denver, I just look and say, okay, whenever Jamal Murray is out of the game, we are full court pressing whoever has the ball, because I think Peyton Watson has a good handle. He doesn't have a point guard handle. If you put Lou Dort or Cason Wallace on him, he's going to struggle to bring the ball up the court. And I think teams will slowly come to that realization, even if they don't have a Lou Dort or Cason Wallace on their team. I think they're still going to say, yeah, but just get into him because I don't think he's going to be able to beat you consistently up the court.
Christian Braun. So last year you called your shot on the Jamal Murray extension. He got one like 3 days after you did the show. I remember messaging you about it. You want to call your shot for Christian Braun? How's that situation going to end?
It's going to end with him getting an extension, and my hunch is that it will be, if I were to try to take a guess, I'm going to say it's going to be 4 years, $105 million. You know, it's about $26 million. I wouldn't be surprised if it was more than that. I think Nuggets fans will be – I think he's really a valuable player and has made himself – even in this preseason, it looks like there's more to his game. $26 million a year feels about right to me. If he got $30 million a year, I think Denver would have to sort of – take it, they'd have to agree to it. But my hunch is there's a little leverage about going into this year without a deal that they can get it for about $105 million.
I think that's a good number. Restricted free agency is weird now. Paul Reed's the last guy to get an offer sheet from another team, but he seems like he's the archetype of player, even with maybe the iffy shooting, that I think teams would come in and say they have cap space or they're really trying to push for like a sign and trade scenario. So I think it's smart. 105 over 4 feels like I'd probably pounce on that if I'm Denver. I'm not going to lie. But I tend to be higher on his offense than a lot of people. Yeah. So
I think the other thing you think about, though, is if Denver didn't want to offer that, if Denver really wanted to play hardball, it's just tough for a guy like Christian to go to a full year without a deal. So there's a little bit of leverage from just it's a little discount. You probably can get 110, 112 next year, but come on. Sign the paper and it's locked in.
Man, if I was his agent, though, I'd be like, look at what I shot on 2-pointers with Nikola Jokic off the floor last year. Like, who else do you have on this team that is going to do that? Which leads me to the actual question for him. Like, what is the more important area of continued offensive development for him? Is it doing more on-ball things outside of transition, or is it, hey, it was cool that he shot 39% or whatever from 3 last year, but that volume needs to tick up from beyond the arc?
It's a great question because I think it's both. And so you're asking me to pick. If you look at the playoffs, it just came down to scoring the 3-point shot. I mean, it was Oklahoma City is going to do. And this, by the way, I just talked about Denver's scheme helping one pass away to stop the pick and roll. What Denver's really doing there is trying to force the ball into, like last night it was Chris Dunn or John Collins for 3 or Derek Jones Jr. said, hey, you guys are going to take 10 shots today. And Kawhi Leonard, we're going to try to limit your shots. That's exactly what Oklahoma City did last year is they said, guess what? This quarter, Christian Braun's taking 8 shots because we're going to not guard him and force it. And so in that regard, his handle doesn't really matter. He has to be able to punish him there. So I think ultimately it's the 3-point shot. And I'm not even sure if it's on volume. It's consistency. He took a low volume last year because he was able to pass up open looks. In the playoffs, they said, no, there's nothing else. We're packing the paint. There's nowhere to drive. You have to shoot it. And, of course, he didn't shoot him very well. So I think it's that. But I will say I'm more confident that he has more to his off-the-dribble game than what he has shown in years past. And we've already seen it in the playoffs where he might be kind of a nice little pick-and-roll ball handler.
I kind of hate boiling it down to this question, but does Denver need to take more threes? Just when you look at the way that other teams are – like I know they have Jokic. I know the way that they can generate their own shots. But as you just mentioned with Christian Braun in the playoffs, it comes down to hitting or missing threes, and it's – like math starts to come into the equation for me.
I don't think so. And I'm kind of alone on this one. I think Denver will get more threes this year just because they have better shooters. And so I think they'll make a handful more. But Denver is so good at punishing you in the paint. The 3-point shot is such a tension between your threes and your shots at the rim. I'd be curious to see if there was a metric that was, because everybody's like the 3-point attempt rate or 3-point shots, if you combined 3-point rate and shots in the restricted area and then just combine that into one number, I wonder where Denver would fall. Because my hunch is that they are just a rare example of a team that is mostly the at the rim part, but they really work together. Denver puts pressure on the rim. The 3-point shot is the release valve. A lot of teams put pressure on the 3-point line, and the rim is the release valve. Denver just has it in reverse order.
That's a good point. And so I'm looking now. So PBP Stats has the rim or 3 frequency. And last year, Denver was... I must be missing them because now they're not showing on this list. Let's do a search.
Man, I'm so curious. I'm actually very curious for this number. I'm glad they have this.
So they were 18th.
Which is about right? So
yeah.
They're the worst 3-point shooting team, and then they're right in basically league average when you combine the two. And I think that actually feels right to me.
So the streets are saying that Jamal Murray's in shape, that he's more of a leader. I know some of the guys at DNVR have talked about his defense during the preseason. Are we buying into I don't know when the last time we had preseason Jamal Murray hype was, maybe coming out of the 2023 title a little bit, but are we buying it?
There was none coming out of the title, and I think that year he kind of came in and said as much at media day, like, "Yeah, man, I use my way into the shape. That's what I do. I use my way."
Off of going on shows, and they were asking like, "Is Jamal Murray a top 10 NBA player now?" And so in my head, I just have it.
That's hilarious.
Like everyone was really high on Jamal Murray after the title.
No, I think Jamal has successfully been humbled over these last handful of years. He's also had a healthy offseason, but he looks legitimately great. I thought at media day was by far the best I'd ever seen him. And all of the intel out of the summer was that he had turned a corner on those types of things. I think it's fair to be skeptical because when it's been 9 years for him in the NBA, and 9 years in a row you come in out of shape and then you work your way into shape, you kind of have to prove it. But what I will say is he was around Denver all summer. He organized team workouts throughout the entire offseason and team outings. David Adelman credited him and said, yeah, but it wasn't just getting Aaron Gordon and like the main guys together. He reached out to the two-ways. He was staying with them. He was making the whole team feel like they were a part of it. The whole team went down. I think they sent 11 guys to the Rico Hines run a couple weeks or a month and a half ago in the offseason, like this unofficial but organized team workout that he put together. And so I think he's taken on this leadership role. And yes, he looks great. I mean, his quick twitch is back. I will say that before the ACL injury, he was a dunker. If you remember, he had some big drive to the rim and dunks. I don't know that we're going to ever see that Jamal again, but the guy that can shake like a Chris Dunn one-on-one in isolation, can he shake free? To be honest with you, more often than not, Jamal couldn't over the last 2 years. He's been doing that all preseason where I'm like, okay, he can beat those types of guys one-on-one now to get to his spots.
We've talked a little bit about this team's depth so far. Are they meaningfully deeper to you? Because the Valanciunas ad, I think, is big. And I like Bruce Brown and Tim Hardaway Jr. as names and what Bruce Brown did last time he was in Denver. But this isn't 2 years ago, and it feels like they're setting themselves up to be maybe overly reliant on two of these minimum contract guys and then maybe a mystery box or two in a Jalen Pickett or a Julian Strawther.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely with you on Julian Strawther and Jalen Pickett. I think both of those guys are worrisome to me as your depth pieces. But I think there's no question. I mean, mostly because their depth was horrible last year. I think it was almost underrated how bad it was. It really was Russ and then question marks after that. Whereas this year, I think I buy Valanciunas as a guy that can play in that lineup. I buy Peyton Watson because I think he's a really good player that had this untapped potential, and now he's in that role. I buy Bruce Brown in the role the Nuggets play him in. I just think, first of all, even if you don't think he is this great rotational player, last year he's replacing basically Julian Strawther of last year, who was a really, really rough player. So even there, it's a step up. Tim Hardaway Jr., I'm with you. I mean, he's a veteran. He knows where to be, but I'm not sure he's an actual value. Most teams, would he be the 8th, 9th man on most teams? Maybe not. But what I think is more important is that Denver has more than 6 guys. And even Spencer Jones, which I know is funny, he's the big curveball here because I kind of think Spencer Jones is the 10th guy on the Nuggets roster. And when you talk about the guys have defined roles, they want a full court press. Spencer Jones might play 3 minutes a half just to go in there and full court press the ball for a couple minutes. So to me, yes, I was very low on the Nuggets last year in large part because I didn't believe in their depth. I do believe in it this year as being meaningful to provide a spell for the second unit or for the first unit. And I actually think it'll turn out to be a league average, if not better, bench.
Who would you make as that first sub then with the Nuggets when you're pulling Jamal Murray, presumably?
So they did it the other day, and man, now I'm trying to think of who it was that they brought in. I can't believe I can't remember exactly who it was that came in for Jamal. You would think it would be Bruce Brown, but maybe it was Tim Hardaway Jr. that came in. I know he ended the first half with the starting lineup instead of Christian Brown, but I don't remember off the top of my head which one it was. So I'm not sure who I would say the first one would be. I want Peyton Watson to play more minutes with Jokic just because he has such great defense and such great length that I'd like to see more and more of it. But I don't recall who. I don't know who it's going to be. Maybe Bruce Brown. Bruce was obviously, if you remember the championship year, Bruce actually has a typical Nugget. Really bad when he wasn't with Jokic, really good with him. When you got to the playoffs, he played almost exclusively with Jokic because Jokic played the whole game, and he was good. And that was really the arc of his season. So maybe you repeat that again this year.
So who, in your estimation, do you think ends up being, by the end of the year, more important to this team, Jalen Pickett or Julian Strawther? I know you're a little bit lower on Strawther than a lot of others.
I'm pretty low on Julian Strawther. The reason I'm low on him is because I think that he is a guy who's really kind of tunnel visioned, and his role would be sort of almost as a gunner. And I just don't know if he's good enough to be a gunner. And if he's not that for the Nuggets, then what else is he doing? Like, I don't think he can be Cam Johnson, who is very comfortable being the fifth option in an offense. Julian doesn't provide as much, and then defensively he's tough. I think I'm going to say Jalen Pickett, but the real answer is I don't know if either one of them is going to be a major impact piece this year. Here's what I'll say. Jalen Pickett, I think, if you told me Bruce Brown or Jamal Murray were out for 2 weeks, I think Jalen Pickett would do a very nice job filling in for them. Way less dynamic, but he's smart. He'll plug in, and for 2 weeks, he'll make it work. Whereas Julian Strawther, your personality as a unit changes when he's on the floor.
So if you're mentioning Spencer Jones as a potential 10th man, that's someone whose contract will then be converted by the end of the season?
I wonder what Denver's going to do there. They kept an open roster spot for a reason, because I think they intend to fill it later on, and they want to have that. They don't have a ton of trade assets, so keeping a roster spot open right now. Do they need a backup point guard? Do they need another defender? Do they need a power forward? I think that they don't know that yet, and they'll probably get to later in the year and keep that spot open. But my hunch is, when you talk about playoffs, he's not dynamic at all. I don't trust his offense. He doesn't do a whole lot of things, but he's a big body who defends really, really hard and really, really well, and he's a smart guy. I can see him being in a playoff rotation if they were to convert him, to being in a playoff rotation just to do it's the last 2 minutes of the first quarter, go out there and wear down Shea or whoever it is. Just go out there. You might get a foul, you might get two, but you're just going to go out and go really hard on defense and annoy somebody for a few minutes. He's really good at that.
I root for sort of random rookies like that to all of a sudden start contributing to good teams. Even like on the level of, okay, Christian Brown was drafted in the first round, and then he ends up being integral to Denver's title run is always fun. So I would root to see that.
He's an interesting guy, man. I think it's weird to me. Like, Deron Holmes and Zeke Naji have barely played. They've basically been garbage time all preseason. Spencer Jones was playing first half minutes, with the starters. It just shows you where David Adelman views him.
What are your impressions of Deron Holmes? Like, even dating back to Summer League, where I liked a lot of what I saw from him at Summer League when I was doing his write-up, but it doesn't seem like if he's playing for this team, it feels like catastrophe is kind of struck, or it's garbage time, obviously.
I think he's a guy that had an Achilles injury and is a rookie. So he's both a rookie and coming back from a pretty catastrophic injury, and the team is going to treat him as such. He'll be in the G League for the first couple weeks at least of when the G League opens up, he'll be down there. And I don't think the Nuggets will even look at him until after. But if you ask me about as a prospect, I believe in his shot, because his shot I just have seen him shoot in an empty gym too much. I've seen him shoot Summer League, and even in preseason, he shot the ball really well and really confidently. And the idea is he could be a very versatile defender. Like, as a power forward, he's a guy that can guard 1 through 5. That part he hasn't proven yet, and the game is moving fast and all those things, but that's what the next couple months are for, to see if he can build up. If he is that, I actually think he will have a role in the Nuggets down the line. I just would be shocked if that was this year.
Is there anybody else, whether it's like the Exhibit 10 guy like Kessler Edwards or Curtis Jones, that we should be keeping an eye on?
Not really. I mean, Curtis Jones, the team is hyping up a lot, but I think they're hyping him up as a two-way player that'll be in the G League this year, and maybe is a guy they add to the roster next year. But no, I don't think there's anybody else that's going to be playing minutes for the Nuggets this year.
Curtis Jones to me is going to be one of those guys that puts up like numbers in the G League, and then people are going to wonder like, oh, why wasn't he called up? he knows how to score.
He's smooth. I think he's just very smooth player. We're thinking about this. Russell Westbrook was really good with Jokic, and Denver has not had a lot of guys who can just beat their man off the dribble. Curtis Jones can't either. The Nuggets keep getting Trey Alexander last year, Jamal Murray. They're a bunch of crafty guards who just know how to get open with like slithery moves, but nobody that can just one step get by you. And I kind of wish they had one in the pipeline because I would be very curious if it was as an effective weapon next to Jokic.
Are you ready to enter the cookie cutter / lightning round portion of the podcast?
Let's do it.
Looking at the roster right now, before the regular season even begins, what do you view as Denver's biggest need?
Man, this one, the team is so new and it has such a new identity to it that I think this is harder to answer than most years. It does feel like what I just said is probably part of this. I'm worried that teams are going to have, especially athletic teams, are going to have an advantage against Denver, full court pressing them when Jamal Murray's off the floor. So it might be a reliable ball handler who can just beat a press. That's one of the things that Russ might have disguised last year. You can't press Russ. He's too quick. He gets around everybody. Yeah. And so we never thought about this as an issue. But now that it's Bruce Braun and Peyton Watson and Tim Hardaway Jr. bringing the ball up the court when Murray's off, you kind of watch it and go, yeah, they're not really good enough to break a press on their own. And so it might be something as simple as that, and that might be something that the Nuggets look for at the deadline.
Is there anything about this team that's flying under the radar that we haven't discussed that you think deserves more attention?
You know, I guess the way I'll answer this is to say that one of the takes I have that is sort of illogical, I guess, but sometimes you just get a hunch about a team when you're watching them. Aaron Gordon shot 40-something% last year from the three-point line. And most of the time when a guy in his 11th year makes a 10% jump in his three-point shot, you say, okay, that's probably a fluke. And I think 44 or whatever it was is probably a fluke. He was one of the best volume three-point shooters last year. But I kind of buy Aaron Gordon the new shooter. Number one, he also improved his free throw shooting quite a bit. So it wasn't like one number, not the other. And then two, Aaron Gordon is one of these guys that has like really good body control just in all of the things he does. And when I watch his shot, last year there was clearly a mechanical change and it felt mechanical. It feels like this year everything is much more fluid, as if he had to like train his body very rigidly to make this new motion, and now the motion is just integrated into what he's doing. So if I were to predict, I think Aaron Gordon's going to shoot 39% from three this year, like have a second year in a row where he's like a reliable three-point shooter.
Do you think Denver's defensive approach, assuming that he's not the one who's like handling the high pickup points, or if they are going to more zone, does his life get easier this year on defense then?
I don't think it gets easier. I think it gets more logical. You know, like what I'll say is I think it makes a bigger impact, because you are right that last year he had to cover for Michael Porter quite a bit and just say, okay, well, Mike can't guard this guy, so you have to do it. And that can be impactful when you have to go guard Kawhi Leonard. Okay, Kawhi might get shut down or whatever. But Aaron Gordon can make a bigger impact as a help defender, as an all-around scheme cover for Jokic, and I think he'll be in position to do that a lot more this year. So I don't think it makes it easier. I just think it makes it more impactful.
So if I was to ask you to build the 10-man rotation for this team, we know who the starters are. There are those five. Who will end up being the five most used reserves to you?
To me, no question, it'll be Peyton Watson and Valanciunas. I think it's almost certainly going to be Bruce Braun and Tim Hardaway. And then I think the next, if you're asking me what they will go with, it's going to be Julian Strawther, I think, more often than not early on. I think there's a chance that it could be Spencer Jones, and I think there's a chance it could be Jalen Pickett. I like Spencer Jones and Jalen Pickett significantly more than I like Julian Strawther. And I might even like those guys more than Tim Hardaway. I think you need the shooting, and so Tim's going to be up there and probably have a long runway to kind of acclimate to the team. But I really like Jalen Pickett. I really like Spencer Jones. And I think that those guys, I would not be surprised with, as opportunity, as guys are out and they just move up a chair, I would not be surprised if the team looks as good or better when they play and maybe earn some more minutes by the end of the year.
You mentioned before about David Adelman saying he wants to go 9, 10, 11 players deep. And it feels like in training camp now, where we used to have muscle watch, it's one slimmed down watch all of a sudden. Like, this guy lost weight. And now the new thing is, yeah, we're going to play, like, we want to play 10 deep. Do you think that David Adelman actually means this? Like, we're looking at the Nuggets on a game-to-game basis, and they are routinely going 10, 11 guys deep.
Well, the thing about that is I think he 100% believes it. the question is, if the Nuggets are 4-7, the urge to play Jokic 38 minutes is going to be there, and it's going to, whatever happens, that'll be the real test. But I think that David Adelman truly believes that you watch the Oklahoma City Thunder play and you say, how do you make it through an 82-game season, and how do you play at defense for 82 games? You play it by playing 10 or 11 guys, because that means 4 or 5 of your guys are only playing 10, 12 minutes a night, and those guys can go really hard on defense. And if Jokic, instead of 37, is at 33, 34, he can go a little bit harder on defense in select spots. So I think he truly believes that the only way to defend in today's NBA is with athleticism and intensity, and the only way to do that is to play 10, 11 deep. We'll just see if like I said, Nuggets just can't fall behind early in the season in the schedule.
And if they can go that deep, I think it helps a ton to eat the regular season innings. I look at their roster and wonder, though, like, is that a 10-man rotation that would work in the playoffs the way that kind of Indiana and OKC? And the answer to me is no.
There's no way. There's no way. I think the Nuggets. And think about this: last year they had 6 guys, and they fired their coach 3 games before the playoffs, and they still were able to piece together. I think the Nuggets just know the regular season is one challenge, and once it's over, that challenge has nothing to do with the challenge that's ahead in the playoffs. So how do they get through the regular season? I think they're hopeful that they finally have the depth to do it.
And the thing that just boggles my mind, like, Michael Porter Jr. had the shoulder thing. Wasn't Aaron Gordon basically playing like one leg? But they still push OKC to 7. I feel like that doesn't get. I know the games they lost were like blowouts, but I feel like that doesn't get talked about enough by myself included. It wasn't just they pushed them to 7, but and I know everyone's banged up, but like, you had 2 of your main guys like dealing with serious shit. I think
Michael Porter, I think he averaged 7 points per game in one of the series. You're talking about Denver's one of their main weapons, and he just could not score in the postseason. So I agree. Yeah, he's averaged 7 points a game in that series against Oklahoma City. I think he made 9 total 3-pointers in 7 games. Like, he could not shoot. He had one arm, and yes, Aaron Gordon was dealing with that calf injury all year that turned into a hamstring injury at the end. I'm with you. I think Denver had 3.5 healthy bodies by the end of it and still competed at the highest level.
This question, once again, is just so pointless for Denver about their go-to crunch time unit. So I will ask it this way. Do you see any of the spots in that crunch time lineup having the potential to be futzed and fiddled with, or is it just like, no, that's the default, like there's really no shifting from there?
I think that there is likely to be no shifting, especially if Christian Braun continues to play well. But one of the things I will point out was that in the playoffs last year, Christian Braun was a little spooked from 3, especially in that Oklahoma City series. And I would not be surprised if Denver got to a point where they said, you know what, especially if you're final 3 minutes and you're down 5, where it no longer becomes about, it becomes more about scoring than it is getting stops. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried a Tim Hardaway Jr. in that spot, or even a Bruce Brown, and just said, okay, CB is not making his shots. I don't think this would happen in one game, but over the course of a series, I could see them just going to that offensive lineup and trusting their zone a little bit. And we saw this yesterday. Denver actually got outscored by like 9 points in 3 minutes when they went to Tim Hardaway and for Christian Braun at the end. But if you go back and watch those possessions, wide open shot for Cam Johnson for 3, wide open shot for Cam Johnson again, wide open shot for Tim Hardaway. They missed all 3. But when you just talk about what quality of a shot did they get in their 4 possessions in that lineup, 3 of them were wide open threes for their best 3-point shooters. They just happened to miss them.
Do you have a Wackadoodle lineup that you'd like to see David Adelman try this year?
I think the double bigs counts for this, to be honest with you. I'm just so intrigued by it. Do you remember the Plumlee-Jokic lineups from a couple years back?
No, I feel like did I wipe those from memory? Seems like something
there were a handful of plays. Like, there's one play in particular that I remember where Jokic pitches to Mason Plumlee out on like the left wing or right wing, runs a little fake dribble handoff, then turns back and runs an actual dribble handoff for an empty corner lob for him. And it was just one of these things where it's like, that's 2 centers running a dribble pitch, fake DHO, pick and roll into a lob in quick order, and it was awesome. And I just have these hopes for the Val Jokic lineups being this weird lineup that everyone's like, we don't know what to do.
I want to see that lineup, and I don't know what it would look like on offense then, but like, then let's get them with Aaron Gordon, Peyton Watson, and Christian Braun, and they'll just be enormous.
Just monsters all around.
Maybe Spencer Jones instead of Christian Braun. He's 6'7", right? So we'll throw him in there.
You know what? I mean, maybe Deron Holmes, when he gets done with his G League stint, like, he can shoot the 3. I really think he can, and he has a huge wingspan, so maybe he's part of this.
So before I ask you to just make a couple predictions, is there anything else about the Nuggets we haven't discussed that you think warrants some spotlight?
I'm very curious. I think their front office had a really good offseason, and it was a rookie front office, John Wallace and Ben Tenzer. If you look at it, they signed 2 guys to minimums, and their guys were excited about Tim Hardaway Jr., Bruce Brown, good value. Cam Johnson deal was incredible. I did not see it coming, and I think it was good value. And the Valanciunas deal is also just opportunistic. I mean, they really got rid of an albatross Dario Saric contract for Valanciunas, which just feels like a double win. It's insane. So I'm inclined to say these guys seem really good, but we're going to find out what they do with Christian Braun and Peyton Watson's extension. That's also part of the GM job. Can you get good value there? And I do think Denver has to make some kind of move at the deadline. Not has to, but should. They kept the roster spot open, and they have Julian Strawther, maybe even Deron Holmes as trade chips. And I think Denver is good enough to win it this year. But if you get to that point and you can upgrade your roster even just a little bit. So I'm kind of curious to see with this rookie front office who had a really good offseason. It's not really over until they get past the trade deadline, and I just have no idea if they're going to be able to pull that off or not.
I've been trying to figure out a way to get Ayo Dosunmu to Denver because I think I might just pick them to win the title if they were able to do that. But I can't, not having their pick available. I don't know if swaps and stuff gets it done, especially if like Zeke Naji needs to be the outgoing money in that scenario.
See, Zeke Naji, 3 years left on this deal or something.
That thing goes on, like, that's the Patrick Williams of contracts now. It just like goes on, and I know he signed it first, but it goes on forever.
I mean, Zeke Naji might be the 13th or 14th guy on the roster right now. And I think Hunter Tyson, who by the way also signed a contract extension with Calvin Booth, is the 15th they're the 13th and 14th. They don't have a 15th spot. They're the 13th and 14th guys. Actually, take that back. They're the 14th and 15th guys. Spencer Jones, who's a two-way, is ahead of both of them.
I was about to say, on a team with 14 guaranteed contracts, one of them is the 15th guy. We didn't talk about the Peyton Watson extension just because I didn't think he was going to get one. Is that the accurate read on the situation?
I think Denver will try to sign him to one. And I think if you look at Denver, I mean, Denver's in this weird spot where the last 2 years have been so disappointing that I don't think you no longer think about long term. I mean, I think Nuggets fans are just like, the window's open. The last 2 years feel like wasted opportunity. Who cares about the future? But if you forget that for a second, Cam Johnson is old. Aaron Gordon is old. Peyton Watson, if he hits and you are able to get him on an extension that starts next year for 3 years, it extends the title window for Jokic, the remainder of Jokic's prime. If it doesn't hit, then you're kind of in trouble. But if you don't sign him to one and lose him or whatever happens there, or if you don't sign him and he has a great year and now he's outside of your price range, you get in a pickle there. So I think Denver has to make a little bit of a gamble. I think they can get him on a tradable contract because I think his skill set is at least intriguing, and he's young. He was one of the younger players in the draft when he was picked. I think he's 22 years old now. So he's still really young. He'll be 25 when that contract's up. As long as he doesn't pull a Zeke Naji and you're able to get him at $15 million a year, I just think there's going to be teams that look at that down the road and would trade for that if he sort of doesn't hit, if he hits the middle of the road mark for him. But I'm hopeful that he's very good, and if you have him under contract, it gives you flexibility to retool your lineup here in the next 2 and 3 seasons.
You mentioned how Nuggets fans are kind of just like in F the future mode, and I think I noticed that in the reactions to the Cam Johnson trade, because my thing was, and in the interest of full transparency, I didn't hate the trade, but if I was giving up my unprotected 2032 pick, I would have wanted to get off Zeke Naji. I wanted something else. So then Grant, my co-host, and I proceeded to go through an exercise in a later episode of, well, how could they have done better? And we struggled. Yeah. Like it just, I don't know that I was wrong. I'm still kind of skeptical. I think that I go back and forth on Cam Johnson's defense, especially in a playoff context. But like, I understand it better now when you go through that exercise of like, there's this crown jewel trade asset to them. But I've criticized the Warriors about this. I've criticized other teams about it. Like, you have this transcendent megastar, the best player in basketball. You're obligated to go all in. And I think the fact that you were able to get Jonas Valanciunas, and like, you aren't able to do that if you don't make the Michael Porter Jr. trade. So I've come around on it for the most part, still healthy skepticism. And I think it's the right mindset to have. And again, I don't know what the alternative path with that 2032 pick would have been, but to just the optics of getting rid of it and still having Zeke Naji just bothered me a little bit, I guess is what it was.
Zeke Naji might still be around in 2032 as well. I'd have to check the expiration on the contract. Here's the thing I'll say, though, my theory about roster construction, with Sam Presti being the exception to the rule on this. I think it's like when a player in a playoff series gets 2 fouls, a star player, and the coach sits him down. It's like you're punishing yourself prematurely for him being in foul trouble. and you might not ever matter, and all you did was just cost yourself minutes. I think that's how it is when it comes to future roster construction. Like, oh, Denver's not going to have many picks in the future. Very true. Very possibly could be the case. But more likely is just try to win now, and something will make itself available to you. Maybe you sign Spencer Jones to a cheap deal, and he turns out to be a tradable asset because he's a really good player. Those types of things seem to happen when you just keep the title window open in the short term as long as you can.
That's the, you know what, let's galaxy brain this. They traded that pick because they knew they were going to have Spencer Jones. Like, they were going to be able to get him.
That's what I'm trying to say. That's exactly it.
So how many games do you have this team winning, Adam, and where do you see them landing in the West regular season standings?
A couple weeks ago, I had them at 57 wins, which is a franchise record. I'm lowering it to 56. I know that's high. I took the under on the Nuggets last year, and I hit. I was low on them last year. I thought they might be a 5 seed. They ended up tying for the 5 seed. So this is not a thing where every year I pick them to be this juggernaut. I just believe in this team this year. I think it's the right collection of guys. I think David Adelman, we didn't talk much about him, but I'm very excited about him as a coach. I think he's a very different kind of coach than what Michael Malone was. I think Jokic is the smartest player in the NBA, and he deserves a coach that is a bit of a strategist and a thinker, and I think David Adelman is that. He's one of these young, forward-thinking coaches that isn't afraid to try new things and really think about the game, not just go with established principles. I think they're going to win 56. I do think that there'll be some figuring things out with the bench, but Jamal Murray being in shape, I mean, the Nuggets, here's the thing, man. The Nuggets always get to where they get, usually top 3 in the Western Conference, with Jamal Murray being out of shape till January or mid-December, and 6 playable players, and a coach and GM that hate each other. So if you can do that in a suboptimal situation, this year to me is optimal. This is actually a Nuggets team that I think has the right philosophy and personnel for their philosophy, and I think it's going to be a very fun, very successful season. 56 wins, 2 seed in the West, because Oklahoma City is going to win 84 games somehow, and they're going to get to the playoffs, and they're going to be in the same tier as all of the top teams in the league. Not better, not inevitable that they win, but I think they're going to be better than they were last year and will challenge all the best teams in any series they face.
I actually just did my record predictions, and I had them at 53 because the Cam Johnson and Aaron Gordon of it all, how much time are they missing? Cam Johnson's weird because I don't know how much of his missed games are due to, those injuries were serious versus, or like he was playing for teams that just didn't matter. Then I listened to your post-game show after the Clippers. I then penciled them in for 55. You talked me, I think they're overs at 54.5. So you talked me up. Let's 2 wins. Based off one preseason game.
One preseason game. It's not. I will say it's not just that. The team being together. Michael Malone at Media Day last year was asked about, like, how is Peyton Watson look? He says, I don't know. I haven't seen him all summer. I haven't talked to him. I haven't heard from him. When I talk to him, I'll ask. And he was almost being coy about the fact that nobody was together all offseason. This offseason, the Nuggets spent it entirely together, outside of Valanciunas and Jokic, who were abroad. But everybody else was in the gym together. They all came into the camp in shape. I think they all kind of know, hey, man, the title window for us probably is going to be like 7 total years when it's all said and done. 4 of them are behind us. We have 1 title. I think they all know that, hey, an opportunity like this doesn't come very often. Let's make the most of it. And it's just a very excited but also professionally confident group that I haven't seen for the last couple of years.
Non-OKC division, what, as of right now, do you think is a particularly fascinating or concerning playoff matchup team for Denver?
Minnesota and Golden State will be my 2 answers now. I think Denver, we haven't seen them play Golden State with this iteration, and I don't know if it's a great matchup for Denver or a terrible one. They're they're a smart team. I think Denver's smarter than most teams, and Golden State, they might not be smarter than them. But Minnesota has the athleticism, and in particular, they have a matchup that Denver can't seem to solve, and that's Jamal Murray versus Anthony Edwards. It's the one guy that Anthony Edwards is the one guy that turns Jamal Murray into, takes away playoff Murray. So I think that one, I would love it if Denver had to face them this year in the playoffs, because it feels like the year they won the title, they had to go through the Lakers and LeBron, the team that had always beat them in the playoffs. I feel like this year they need to go through Minnesota, because if they can beat them, it would be like, okay, they've slayed the dragon.
I would love to see. I don't even know what I would make of it if they were up against Golden State and there's a Horford Quentin Post front court against Valanciunas and Jokic. I don't even know what I would make of that matchup. Could I get one additional Nuggets prediction from you, Adam, for this coming season? It could be whatever you want.
I've given you a lot of ones, some of my takes about Peyton Watson being good and this or that. I think it'll be Jokic's best defensive season. I kind of am betting on, if I want to get spicy, I might predict here. I'm going to make a couple predictions on Jokic. I think he's going to have the lowest per game averages, probably in points, rebounds, and assists that he's had in the last 4 years, probably in every category. So if you go down, that might be like 24.5 points per game, 10, 11 rebounds, and maybe 8 assists. That's still a great stat line, but lower in every mark than before. I think he's going to finish third or fourth in MVP voting because of it for some weird reason. But I predict he will have his most efficient season yet, which is funny because he's had some of the most efficient seasons ever. And I would not be surprised if he was at around 24 points per game on 70% true shooting or effective field goal percentage. And it's going to be, I also predict, I was looking at this, in Daniel Gafford last year, he had like 39 straight made 2-point field goals. I don't think he's going to beat that because they're all dunks. I think Jokic might have 2 or 3 perfect games in a row this year where he has like, Jokic was 8 for 8. Next night he was 7 for 7. And then he starts a game 6 for 6 before missing a 3.
What is the logic behind you thinking that, aside from, obviously I get the lower counting stats if you think especially he'll play fewer minutes, but just the efficiency stuff?
I think Jokic can make every shot he wants to a certain degree. And then he has to like strain himself to make the other ones, right? So, and I think that he only strains himself when there's no other options available. I think the Nuggets aren't going to struggle to get open shots. So I don't think they'll find a lot of late clock, Sombor shuffles. Okay, I got to really drive into the defense here and go up over 2 guys. I think he'll be able to just kind of pick his spots this year and say, yeah, I'm open under the rim, a little floater. Yep, that's my mid-range jumper. That's what I'm doing. And I just think he'll have a lot of nights where he only takes 7 shots, 8 shots. And there's just bound to be a game or 2 where he strings 2 of them together.
70 effective field goal percentage or true shooting percentage would be insane. I fave that. I like that one. Adam, thank you so much for doing this, as you do every year. It was a great discussion. Are you able just to remind our audience where they can find you and all the fantastic work that you're putting out?
DNVR Nuggets podcast. We actually made a documentary this year on the Denver Nuggets season. We're so excited for it. We made this documentary that'll be on YouTube here in a couple weeks, and then in a couple days. And then the All-NBA show with Tim Legler. We do it twice a week, and Legs is the best.
You guys are great. You guys are just great
Appreciate
together.
It.
Also, I meant to mention this. You taught Jokic the word emphasis. Is that true?
It is. I ask him the same question every day, and he gets annoyed. So tell me if you think this is fair or not. When you walk into a practice, I ask, what did you guys go over in practice today? It's like an opener question that just says, hey, I have questions I want to ask, but I'll let you kind of tell us what happened. So I asked him, what was the emphasis of practice today? And he said, what does that mean? I explained it to him. And then the very next question, he said, yes, that was our emphasis. I was like, hey, man, quick learner.
I think that's a fair question.
To me, it's just kind of like, hey, take the wheel real quick. Is there anything, that stood out to you about the practice? Okay, now I'll get into my real questions, but maybe you say so. Oftentimes, that's the most illuminating question because they'll tell you, oh, Cam Johnson was going crazy today. We worked on plays for him and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, okay, now I know what my next follow-ups will be.
Adam, thanks once again so much. Remember to follow Adam on Twitter at Adam_Mades. The link is in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. And as you know by now, sir, I will be pestering you again down the line.
Let's do it, man.